Well, let's see if I can get this out.
You're at 109 right now.
The message for today's podcast is related to a book by Paul Fleischman. It's called Seedfolks. 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 All right. And it says here, Seedfolks is a children's novella written by Paul Fleischman with illustrations by Judy Pedersen. The story is told by a diverse cast of characters living on Gibbs Street in Cleveland, Ohio, each from a different ethnic group. The idea that was driven home today in class, I'm a substitute teacher, and I had the pleasure of attending a class led by the regular teacher. So although I'm a sub, I was in the classroom with the regular teacher who had been out due to the fact that the teacher was recuperating from an accident, a car accident. Well, the teacher has backed. Thank God. The teacher is doing well, healthy, and recuperating from what appears to be, very well. Anyhow, I watched the teacher, and the teacher continued with the lesson on Seedfolks. And so Seedfolks, from what I gathered from today's activity, is that it's about bringing people together. It's about a garden bringing people together. And so the idea was, how do people interact in American society? This was, one of the questions. And based upon the book's characters, the characterization of American society by one of the characters in the book, the character said that in America, unlike the country where this character is from, which is India, in America, people do not know their neighbors. All right. And to compare, in India, people know their neighbors. They know who they are. They know their stories. In America, it's not like that. And people do not know or even care to learn about one's story. Right? So we avoid each other. And then there was a moment in the class when the teacher described, walking down the street and seeing another person walking in the opposite direction, and how, inevitably in America, we do everything that we can to avoid, talking to that person. We look in opposite directions. We look at trees. We look at birds. We look at the ground. We grab our cell phones and pretend that we're engrossed in something, a movie or a book, or something has taken our attention away from that person who's walking, coming in the opposite direction, walking in the opposite direction that we're walking in. And, that characterization, is very true. Or rather, that has been my experience with basically Western people. And that idea really stuck out because I had an experience, or rather not me personally. Well, I mean, I have plenty of experiences, but this one particular story was about my colleague in South Korea. You see, although we were removed from America, we encountered Americans in a foreign land. So there we were in South Korea, and there I am, an American, and my colleague, and another American, and we happened to, well, I believe, it didn't happen to me, so I wasn't there. My colleague told me the story about how she was walking down the street, and another one of our colleagues from the same office, okay, but also countrymen, from America, right? Well, our colleague was walking in the opposite direction of my friend or another colleague. This is a complicated story. I'm making it so complicated. Look, I had two colleagues, okay? And one told me this story, and the story was about another colleague and how that colleague ignored her when she was walking down the street, okay? There, I got it out. So she said, my colleague said she was walking down the street and noticed that our fellow colleague was coming down the street walking down the opposite direction. Same sidewalk, same side of the sidewalk, same side of the street rather, okay? And just as they were going to pass, and just as my colleague was preparing to say hello just to be pleasant, all right, she says that our mutual colleague, decided that the tree was peculiarly interesting at that particular moment. So interesting that it took her attention away from everything else that was going on that street. Yeah, that happened. And I believe I had a similar experience to that, where I was walking down the street or walking in a hallway, around the same colleague, and same thing happened, Yeah, so anyway, I can attest to, at least I have that experience, that story of my colleague to attest to this ideal about Americans, But this podcast and this episode, I really want to talk about, my experience in Korea and share some things about it. But I don't want to color the experience that someone who's listening to this podcast may have. I don't want my story to be the story or the expectation of my listeners. And it takes some hard work to detach yourself from this story that I'm telling. And I say that because I was quite frustrated listening to another person's story and assuming it as my own, or assuming that the experience that they had would be the experience that I had, which could not have been farther from the truth. For instance, oftentimes you hear some places are dangerous, and then you travel to those places and you discover, well, no, it wasn't dangerous. It wasn't the way that it was made up to be in my mind, based upon the stories that I had heard about the place. At least sometimes it's not as dangerous. I've never been in a dangerous situation. I'm getting a phone call. Let me turn my phone off so I don't get interrupted like this while I'm recording again. And yes, put the phone on airplane mode. There we go. Yes, airplane mode is enabled. Okay, we're good to go. So that's what people will do in America. They'll ignore you as you're walking down the street. I can attest to that being the case in Denmark. The Danes don't particularly care for the well-being of other people unless they know them, unless they are, friends or family, maybe colleagues. Otherwise, a stranger. No. I remember walking across the street, approaching a gentleman, and the gentleman turned away from me, and I thought, I didn't want anything, need anything. And that's the presumption that I have of someone doing that to me. They're assuming, this person probably wants something from me. And I'm like, no, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I didn't want anything from this person. And I was continuing to walk, and I just thought, well, maybe I'll, give a head nod or a gesture to that person. But they didn't even welcome that. And as soon as I got in their proximity, they turned away from me. And I thought, huh. However, well, what I did think after I learned about the Danes from a number of YouTube videos and personal experiences, I thought, oh, okay, there it is. There's that behavior that they're doing. So in some sense, um, listening to another person's story was beneficial. Um, Luckily, though, I didn't go looking for that experience. I wasn't looking for, oh, look at the Danes. See, there they go. Okay, let's try this again. Let's try this person. Oh, look, this person, doesn't care. I wasn't looking for those experiences, but I certainly found them, and they mirrored or they echoed what I had been told. So, in this sense, I want to tell you about Korea and my experiences there, but I don't want them to color your experience, or I don't want you to look through look at Korea through my lens. Just want you to listen. That's it. All right, so I recall on a number of occasions walking down the street and a Korean man walking opposite me, or on the same side of the road, but walking in the opposite direction. Okay. And within 5 to 10 feet of him, or maybe even 20 feet, whenever he would see me, whenever these men would see me, I would often notice that they would need to spit. They're walking, they'd hockalooey, and then look up, at me. Now, I took that as, that's some machismo stuff. It could certainly be some racist stuff, but it was just a male display of it could be distaste of territory, being territorial. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that. Perhaps from what I understand, perhaps the Koreans were very upset that their country was overrun with foreigners, with non-Koreans, because that has been the trend. That was something that I heard was reported. I can't report or name the statistics, but a great number of people in Korean society are foreign born, are non-Koreans, and I think the numbers are growing. You have actually a lot of Koreans who marry outside, or for instance, some Korean men will marry Vietnamese women, or take a wife from another Asian country. That contributes to the othering, or the changes in their society. And then there are a number of foreign English teachers like myself. That's what I was in their society. And if you're walking down the street casually and you don't look like you're dressed for work, one may assume certain things about you. I think English teachers are welcomed in Korea, but at the same time, it's like, you're a foreigner. So, I don't know. Yeah, so Korean men and spitting, I would notice that. Then, along with this book, Seedfolks, right? Seedfolks is about the garden, bringing people together and having them talk and learn things about each other, and that's a powerful and an excellent way to break down the walls between people, because there certainly are walls and we certainly need them broken down. The other thing about Seedfolks is that there were stereotypes. that were raised, because there's a point in the book that was mentioned today during class about um, a moment, an instant where one character had something nasty to say about another character, disparaging, who they were based upon the stereotype that they had of people from their country. She said, "You dirty foreigner." That was what the character said. And that was one moment where these two characters interacted. And then in another moment, it was I don't know, days or weeks later, um, the woman who had called this other person a dirty foreigner had forgotten what she said. Um, and the two characters were in the garden. You see, the garden is bringing the people together, and they had a pleasant interaction in the garden where they were talking about, gardening, plants, and what have you. And yet, the person, the character who had been called the dirty foreigner by this woman, felt uneasy about this pleasant interaction that he was having with the same character, with this woman. So previously, she said she called him, yeah, it was a dude, it was a man and woman. Previously, she called him a dirty foreigner. He remembered it, but they were having a good conversation, and he felt uneasy about that. And so he reminded her that she called him a dirty foreigner, to which she, gasped, and she was like, "No, I don't remember," and, all of this sort of Karen-esque behavior, yeah. But anyhow, the idea of stereotypes, of people prejudging others, based upon sometimes, real things, but basing all people or groups of people from um, from similar backgrounds, rather than judging an individual or seeing a person as an individual and judging them on their merit, on that basis. We lean into these stereotypes. In the same class with the same students, we had a discussion about stereotypes, because I told the students about my experience again in Korea, and I told them about how, as a black man, as a black American, as a black person teaching in Korea, I often felt slighted, by Korean society. Certainly through the dating scene. Instead of seeing Korean women choosing to be with, black men, oftentimes they were walking hand in hand, proudly strutting themselves hand in hand with white men. Certainly there were absolutely, sexual relations being had between Korean women and black men, but when they were walking in public, they tended to be with white men. Of course, maybe this was just my personal, impression or personal experience, but that certainly seemed to be the case. I don't mean to rant and to talk about Korea. This is certainly, focused on Korea, but I did share that with the student. Well, I didn't talk about the relationship aspects. I'm free to talk about that here on my podcast. What I told the students was that Koreans had an ideal about English speakers, and when they met an English teacher who was black, they tended to I guess enter a moment of cognitive dissonance, like, wait, what is this? Who, why, how? I remember I remember watching the documentary about the Los Angeles riots, Saegu 429, and they were talking about how when they came to America, when the Koreans came to America, they expected to see a land of white people, of white folk, and they were surprised to see so many brown people, the Latinos, right? That's the idea that they had. Well, likewise, equally in Korea, I talked with Koreans, and they often told me that they believe that um, the an English speaker, or the ideal that they have of an American, is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person, a white person. Of course, with hip hop, with entertainment, with so many avenues, they have images of black people, but largely, when it comes to their educators, they think that they are and they should be, white. There was a survey taken in 2010, 2012 at the latest, and a couple from England surveyed students at a university where I was teaching. And yeah, can you believe it? A black man was teaching at a university? Yes, it's possible. All right. See, that's the thing. There are exceptions to all of these rules. But here's the last thing that I'm going to say about, Korea and about stereotypes. And the reason I'm talking about stereotypes is because it was brought up today in our discussion of the book Seedfolks in class. All right. They did a survey, and they found that there was a preference, or there was a preference for different nationalities, ages. What is that? They did a cross-section study, and they wanted to know the preference of the Korean students at that time for a Korean teacher. Who did they think would be the best Korean teacher? And they discovered that the hierarchy at the top of this pyramid, the hierarchy, at the top tier, there was the young, white, British female. Young, white, British female. So that covers all of the parameters. All right. So age, race, nationality, and gender. All right. These are the areas that were covered in the study. And at the top of the tier, that's who Koreans at that time, at that school, believed would be the best English teacher. Below that was a young, white, British male. And I think third or fourth, yes, I believe the African American, the young African American male, fell below the young white American male. So third on the list was a young black American male. Fourth was a young black American female. And then less desirable, or the least desirable, I believe, was the South African. That was at that time on that particular survey. But this is what they said. So I think South African was the least desirable, not because South Africa is something wrong, but because of the 7 nations from which English teachers can legally be hired. Those 7 nations include the United States, Canada, England, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and I'm missing one other, Scotland. But Scotland includes the UK, right? England, Scotland, Ireland. Okay, I think those are the 7. I hope I didn't replace Scotland with one other. All right, let's go with 6. There are either 6 or 7 countries from which Koreans will hire, or many people will be hired. South Africa, that's right. I mentioned it, but I didn't include it. Scotland's included with the UK. It's South Africa. So among those 7 nations, South Africa was like, I think, the least represented. So that would probably be why South Africa was at that time the least desired or least preferred. But outside of those categories, those parameters, Asians did not fit in there. And the darker the Asian by complexion, the lower their rank. Believe it or not, those were the discoveries. Those were the things. These are some hard truths, but this is what it was. So that survey pretty much shaped my experience, shaped my opinion, at least when talking. When talking about these issues, I spoke from that test or that survey, and I said, definitively, that survey says these things. Of course, through my experience, things could change or be different, but not very much. All right, those are my thoughts. Those are just my thoughts. Those are just my expressions. That's just me expressing myself. Don't but don't buy into this. Don't just take it with a grain of salt and keep on pushing in whatever direction you're going in. This is just one man's story, and it's not yours. But doggone it, I've traveled the globe and I've got some stories to tell. So this is just another one of them. Peace and blessings.
You're at 109 right now.